afternoon. It's the 1st of May, believe it or not. We made it. It's mildly warm outside, which is better than it's been all year. But no, thanks for joining us today. We are going to be talking about building sustainable relationships, and we're going to delve a bit into sort of pitching, how to win the right sort of clients, the pitch process, understanding some of the emotional aspects of clients' decisions, attention to detail, how to have open and honest conversations, and then a bit sort of into the commercial side of things. And to join us today, we have Nick Goff, who's Group Head of Business Development at VCCP, and Kate Barker, who's Executive Director of Growth and Development for EMEA at RGA. So thanks for being here, guys.
Thanks for having us.
That's all right. Do you want to do quick intros yourself? Just tell us a little bit about your role and what you do. Kate, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I'm Kate Barker. I have been at RGA for just over five and a half years. Time flies. I think it's sort of the longest I've pretty much done anything, which is kind of weird. But I've got a slightly strange career path into business development. I actually was an account exec in Wyden Kennedy when I graduated. Hated it and ran away with the circus, and I was a cabaret performer for about 8 years. And it turns out if you can handle a drag queen in dressing room, you can handle a new business pitch. So there's lots of parallels, I think, between circus and new business. And I think it's one of the most creative and interesting and varied roles in an agency. So I finally found my niche. I'm going to hand over to Nick.
Thank you. There's no way I can top running away with the circus. It's been far more traditional than that. But yeah, I've had a pretty broad mixture of agency and client side experience. So everything from sort of small startup shops before they were called startups, through to sort of big global networks like Saatchi's, and the sort of cliche joke that was the only time that my mum knew what I did. I've also spent some time in-house at Sainsbury's, which was pretty illuminating, actually. Being the other side of the fence, a lot of those sort of insights and learnings really helped me move through my career. And now I'm at VCCP, so I'm within the new business team, but have a sort of unique role that I'm looking at how we take the best bits of the VCP famed new business machine and apply it to our existing clients. So looking at how we can grow our existing partners into new capabilities across new geographies, and then some what we call sort of special operations to support those. Although special operations, I think, is far more glamorous than the reality of what they actually are. But yeah, hopefully vaguely qualified to give some perspective on the topic today.
Cool. Thank you for those interests. Very interesting, Kate, I love how you compare new business to a circus. But yeah, let's get into the details then. And I guess the first thing I wanted to start off with is just get a feeling of how you're finding the market at the moment. Whether that be about sort of number of opportunities, the types of opportunities, things that are coming through. I know it's been tough out there for a lot of agencies. Last year wasn't easy for many. So just be great to get a sense, Kate, how things are going at RGA.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I would say, the 5 years I've been here, last year was probably the most challenging, just in terms of the pipeline. We saw a really big dip. I mean, I cover EMEA, but we saw a huge dip in the amount of UK inbound inquiries. And then also just how long it takes to close something. We ran the numbers, and it was something like the average time from, someone first getting in touch to converting was about 3 months. And that was of the stuff that converted. That doesn't take into account the amount of inquiries we've had where suddenly they go on for months, priorities change, a lot of caution with clients. It's definitely felt like it's taking longer and harder to get things over the line. And Nick, I don't know if that's anything you've encountered your side at VCCP.
Yeah, I guess to certain business units it has. We haven't seen it as a sort of broad trend, and certainly not in the sort of creative agency space. But yes, I do understand there are parts of our business that are seeing these elongated cycles, which I think are pretty painful. I think at sort of a broad level from our perspective, sort of volume and value seem pretty consistent year on year. but we're obviously quite keen to focus on the sort of type of opportunities as well, just beyond the numbers. So there are some reassuring trends. We're seeing more briefs coming through for sort of integrated opportunities, bringing sort of creative and media together. There seems to be quite a good, healthy pipeline of big global multinational opportunities. And there's obviously a lot that can go, what we've managed to do, 8 minutes without mentioning AI. There's been a lot of AI briefs, but it's very hard to distinguish about whether these are phishing exercises to upskill the team or whether they have a genuine desire to actually look at how it can improve the efficiency and effectiveness of their business.
And on your role, because it's an interesting role, that it's kind of part client development, right? So organic client growth and part new biz. I guess that's an interesting stance in we saw during COVID and lockdown, a lot of people focusing on their existing clients, wanting to make sure retention was a big thing, upsell, cross-sell. Is that kind of why your role kind of came about? Was that a crucial element of it? Because I feel like typically that's kind of handed to a client services director who manages the account rather than someone in new business thinking about growing an account.
Yeah, definitely. I think because I joined here, what would it have been, end of 2022. So I sort of missed the whole pandemic period, but I think it was a sort of Herculean effort on the business development, the organic side, that was actually key to the sort of health of the business over those 2 years. So I'm sure that provided the catalyst for it. But yeah, as you say, there's an interesting dynamic because it is a very entrepreneurial culture here already, in terms of we have clients that have grown significantly and been with the business for long periods of time. So that is testament to the amazing work the client services team do. But the challenge I know from having worked in client services for the majority of my career is you will set your account plan at the beginning of the year, and you'll have 70%, which will be the sort of day-to-day, 20%, which will be the sort of speculative stuff, how we grow, and then 10% would be the sort of pure moonshot stuff. That 70%, the day-to-day, ends up becoming 150%, and you never get around to that final 30%. So the idea is that I can plug in and help them with that more speculative end of their sort of ambitions for the account. And it doesn't always work. There are some client teams, for instance, that are very protective, and everybody has their sort of fiefdoms on that front, and others that are much more willing and open to embrace on that front. And it obviously depends massively on the type of client. If it's a massive multinational, the client service team can never make a claim to knowing everybody across that business, so there's more scope for me to get involved. Whereas if it's a smaller domestic client, they will be all over that team and making sure that both sides of the business are realizing the full potential.
Yeah, I think it's just a really interesting role. As I said, often we talk about hunters and farmers and sort of how you can make the sort of client services team be more commercial in that regard. So I think it's an interesting approach that you guys have taken to trying to grow accounts. But let's get into sort of pitching. Obviously, with there being less out there, or longer sales cycles, I suppose it's really important that, and I've started to see a lot of agencies get caught out on this, is focusing on the wrong things. And that comes down to qualification, right? And it's really important to qualify out, I think, as much as it is to qualify in, because you don't want to spend your time wasting this time on opportunities that aren't going to be right for you. So Kate, talk me through a bit about that qualification process, which happens within RGA, and how you kind of decide what to go for and not go for.
Yeah, I mean, I think not going for things is often a way to win in terms of the business, in terms of it takes a huge amount of resource to pitch for something, and if it's not the right opportunity, you're wasting everyone's time. And so I think we decline about 85% of briefs that come in. So we've got a pretty stringent process, and I think I've got a pretty good nose after being here for so long of what feels right for us now. And that is a kind of combination of, is it the right client? Do we like the client team? Are they people that we can work with? Is it the right project? And then also, is it the right time in the agency? I'm sure everyone here has had the awful scenario of when you've got a great brief and you've got a great client, but you haven't got the resource. And that's the most frustrating thing for me, especially if it's an opportunity that we've worked hard to proactively generate. But I've also learned the hard way that if you can't 100% dedicate to winning that piece of business, you're up against at least one other agency who is giving it 100%, and you will fail. And so there is no shortcut. It's incredibly competitive market. So I'd say that, putting it through those checks, and also just making sure you've got the right team to deliver the work, or you're willing to take a risk if there's not the right amount of people or right amount of time. Going into it with your eyes open is super important.
And is that decided by consensus, like voted? Is there like a scoring criteria, or does the CEO have the final say, or what's the kind of like ultimate?
Yeah, I mean, we do. I mean, it's fine. There is a scoring criteria that we can use, but we don't really use it that often, to be honest, because we're very rarely in disagreement about anything. It's, I think I've worked with our CEO for so long now. We've got such a shorthand. So I will put my best case forward of what I believe is the right or wrong decision, and 95% of the time she'll align with me. But it is obviously taking into consideration resourcing, the other leads, lots of other business factors go into shaping that opinion.
Yeah, well, I guess that's important that you've clearly got a clear vision of who is the right kind of customer for you guys and what you want to go after, right? Which makes all of that a lot easier. Nick, is there anything you guys do or could add to that in terms of sort of qualifying processes?
No, I thought what Kate said was really spot on in terms of that, not just that question that you ask yourselves about can we win this, but can we win this right now, are two very different things. And we've certainly had instances where you may feel confident in your product or service over competitors, but that won't mean that there's not another agency that is running at this 100% full tilt and hungry. And if you don't have that, it sounds almost like a platitude to say it, but if you don't have that mindset, our founder has this phrase about only the paranoid survive. I think you have to take that mentality, because there will always be someone that will run at it with everything they've got, and that passion can often see them over the line. So working out when you can do that rather than when just on the opportunity and you think the strength of it against it alone, I think is really important. The other thing, which I've never done but always wanted to shamelessly steal, was someone said that as a bit of a prop for that qualification conversation, take what you think your average pitch spend is, so 30-40 grand, get that in monopoly money, put it in a briefcase, and then when you have that discussion, put that briefcase on the desk in the center of the meeting table and actually think, are you willing, because that's what's going to cost you, are you willing to put that on the table as a bet? I just thought it'd always be such a fun thing to do, but I just never got around to doing it.
You could always leave the briefcase empty and just kind of,
yeah.
I think it's a good one. I guess the point there is that people don't often take into account how much they have to invest to win pitches, and to win, you need to be at like 110% to get things over the line. And just on that, like just in terms of then getting into the pitch process, you can, obviously decide you want to win something and go for it. But ultimately, I think it's really important, like we talk about these sustainable relationships, we want to talk about mutual respect and sort of power dynamics between kind of, the client that you're trying to win and the brand and obviously the agency, and obviously setting that up in the right way. And I think, in our eagerness to win, sometimes we can sort of jump over backwards for these clients, especially when maybe opportunities are few and far between, or if people have had a bad year, then there's sort of like a desperation almost for agencies to kind of go for things and win it, which can obviously hinder the relationship or how you kind of go into that pitch. So I suppose for you, just thinking about how do you kind of foster mutual respect and sort of avoid those power dynamics that could hinder relationships.
Yeah, I think at the outset of those relationships, our group chairman, Dougie, was very involved in the Pitch Positive pledge. And we are really, obviously, it's mainly at a domestic level at this moment, but really trying to emphasize the importance of that to our clients. And the adoption of it hasn't been perfect. But we feel that it's brilliant when you see it referenced on clients' briefs, because it shows they understand about a respect of the process and the need to come to a decision and to run it fairly and to give feedback and address all of those sort of plights that affect what is quite a unique industry technique of appointing new partners. The other part to it is, in my previous role, we've worked with an organization called the Client Relationship Consultancy that run their sort of appraisal program. And they talk about the concept of developing this sort of child-adult dynamic, and the pitfalls of falling into that trap. The trajectory of the pitch should actually give you an opportunity to address that, because obviously at the beginning, you are obviously one of a series of suppliers that have expertise that the client wants to consult and test, but you are not in a position yet where they have anything they want to buy. Obviously, if you get to the end of that process and then suddenly they have decided that you can provide value to your to their business, you then obviously are in a position of increased power with more leverage. And I think you have to recognize that, not only just in the negotiations, but using that as the impetus to set up a mutually respectful relationship from the outset. So it should just feel like a natural continuation of that slight shift in dynamic as you progress along the pitch journey.
Yeah, I like that idea about how you say that changes, and obviously showing your strength and capabilities throughout that time. Is that just something that happens, or you think organically, just through the demonstration of your kind of creative and strategic thinking, or is there anything you kind of, I don't know, look to do in terms of how you shape that relationship, how you structure the pitch process or push back on certain things to kind of wrestle that power, or is it just a kind of like natural journey, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think it's hard, obviously. So many times it's very difficult because procurement will be deliberately keeping you at arm's length. So I think the insistence about speaking and engaging the decision makers early on is key, and then just taking the same way that on a client account you would take a sort of marking exercise to marry up characters on your side with targets on their side, to start to foster a relationship, and obviously give you some currency beyond just the quality of your strategy and creative delivery. Taking that approach to a pitch, I think, is really important as well, and working out where you think, following those initial meetings, who's going to take responsibility for those client relationships, because obviously that can help set up the foundation for how they treat you and how they want to work with you.
Yeah, cool. So okay, I guess, from your side, Kate, then getting into the sort of the relationship side of it, because I've always thought about this, a pitch, you've kind of got the solution to the brief and the pitch, what you're putting forward to win, but then there's also the relationship with this agency that you're trying to build over a long period of time. And so how do you kind of connect on a more emotional level to effectively convert potential clients?
I think it's from the outset trying to understand, beyond this brief, what does this client want? What do they need? Because if you can help them achieve their broader ambition within that company, you're in a really good position. You want to be their ally. You want to make them look great. And I think there's things that you can do within the pitch process that can help that, in terms of kind of foster that kind of relationship, trying to get as much time with them as possible, asking the right questions, sending them things that they think might be interested in. Also just showing you really want the business. It's funny, in one of the pitches we did last year, I said at the beginning of the meeting, and also I think it's important to kind of, in those meetings, be passionate, be enthusiastic. That's what clients buy. They want an agency who's really going to want to work with them. And I said, I really want to work with you. We all think this is going to be an incredible project. And they said, you were the only agency who said that. It might not sometimes sound like the coolest thing, but I think clients like it. They want people who are invested in it and, want to be on that journey with them. So I think any way to kind of just show you understand the company, that you're getting under the skin of it, you almost, by the time you get to pitch, you almost want to, if you can get that relationship, already feel like a bit like an extension of their team. Like you've had enough conversations, you've exchanged enough information that, you know, we're feeling like one of them. That's my ambition.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like it's that natural kind of passion and curiosity, I think, in their business. And if you can really show that in an authentic way, you kind of get a bit deeper. But you have to constantly, like, not in an annoying way, but you know, ask those questions to be genuinely interested in a sales scenario, because that's what I feel clients want to hear, right? They want you to really want to understand more about their business beyond just the brief. And like you said, that's where that some of those real, I suppose, challenges come out from, right? From behind the scenes, or maybe what they didn't put in the brief that they kind of forgot to.
Yeah, and it's funny, sort of shared passion points. I mean, you know, RJ, you know, creative innovation company, we do a lot of design based briefs, and you know, a lot of the clients who we're working with are also passionate about design. So it's kind of understanding what they're interested in, sharing things. It might be an artist they're interested in. We might send them, we're really inspired by Bauhaus design. Sometimes we'll send them a book on Bauhaus design and a letter. You know, it's all these things of like, we care about your mindset, we care about your way of looking at work. Kind of connecting with them on that intellectual level, I think, is really helpful.
Yeah, and is that through research or just through talking to them? Is that
Both. Some creepy old-fashioned internet research never goes amiss, but also just from conversation as well.
I think new business people are the ultimate stalkers, right? But it's so important, and then also, like, I'm interested in your role as the BD person, because I guess there's you connecting on an emotional level, but then also maybe other people in your team that also, you know, need to connect on an emotional level. So I'm kind of interested in how you maybe support them, but then also your role in kind of maintaining the brief, the accountability, the attention to detail. So talk me through a bit about your role. You know, I've always thought of us as sort of these puppetry masters behind the scenes and things like that. Is it like that?
Is this one for me? Oh, yes. I mean, obviously it's that I always joke that I feel like I'm the holiday romance, but the team is a long-term relationship. So it's like, you know, I will step away once the relationship is rolling. And I think that's fine. I know some agencies are like, we don't want the business development person to take a bit of a step back. But I feel like if you bring the rest of the team along with the ride, it's fine. And like, you know, I trust them to, you know, maintain the relationship. So I think if you bring people at the right time, I think it's okay, so that, you know, that you are present and the client's not bereft when you sort of vanish. And then what was the other question, Adam?
Just about sort of maintaining the brief and
Yeah, and then I think just really it's kind of forcing the team sometimes to actually just reread the pitch brief during the pitch process, because you forget things. And I think one of the things that we found really helpful is we have the brief, we have okay, we need to achieve X, Y, and these deliverables, but we also write something called a win strategy, which is like, okay, outside of this, what do we need to convey about us? How do we need to make them feel? You know, all the kind of other things that kind of lie outside of the actual prescriptive deliverables, having that alignment at the top of the pitch, keeping everyone accountable, and then also pitch learnings. We're a really production focused agency. We have producer led pitch post pitch reviews, and we put those learnings at the top of every pitch Bible deck. So it's like, these are the mistakes we did last time. These are the things we knew the client liked, just to remind ourselves and to kind of keep that rigor and just, you know, hold ourselves accountable to the experience we already had.
Yeah, so important to keep learning every single pitch that you do. And it's so easy, like you said, to forget things or go off brief, you know, when you're so head down into it. You've got lots of people involved in a pitch, and things are taking like 3 months to convert, right? So it's you can see how that happens. Nick, for you then, I guess, I don't know, like, obviously if you're talking about existing clients, it might be slightly different because they've already got that relationship and that emotional connection to some of the clients. So is your role slightly different in terms of helping them think maybe more commercially or challenging the way they're kind of running that client in terms of trying to identify new opportunities or take that client in a different direction, bearing in mind that they've got the relationship already, so you've got to tread slightly more carefully.
Yeah, I mean, vast majority of my role now is supporting behind the scenes, but it will be with those client teams, as I said earlier, about them being consumed by the day to day. I can effectively act as a conduit between what's happening in other parts of the business that we think that we can take to that client because it will be of interest because of XYZ, and similarly working out with that client team what they are doing that I can take to other parts of the business. So, for instance, if we are working with an FMCG brand domestically in one of our markets, another part of the network has ambitions in that space. What can we codify? Where can we utilize talent, take it across geographies, and use it to create momentum? Or can I work with that particular client is reliant on us for 2 or 3 capabilities, but being part of the team have spotted there's maybe opportunities to introduce new specialism. How do I present that in a way that feels compelling? Because I think probably any client service person in a network can sometimes feel overwhelmed because you are not only do you have your own agenda for your account, but you then probably have anywhere between 10 and 15 different other business units trying to engage you. So I have to sort of be empathetic and work out where are the best opportunities, where they can drive the most value, and where ultimately it's going to help improve their client relationships to the strongest degree.
Yeah, it's more kind of entrepreneurial, really, in terms of understanding what the business is doing and what you can take to market, looking at sort of productization and things like that, to further the company. So that's I think it's something that obviously new business like we constantly need to look at, but it's difference between something, an opportunity coming to you're sort of proactively almost identifying or trying to identify opportunities to take to them, right? Is that kind of the gist of it?
Yeah, definitely. And also it's having done the client service role myself, it's you may spot on a client conference call that there's someone on that you think it would be interesting to talk to, or you may have a conversation with someone and put a note that you should follow up, but in reality that then gets dropped to the bottom of your list and you never get round to actioning either of those scenarios. So sometimes it's about me picking up with them and saying, look, that opportunity, that client contact, this is how you could progress it forward, and this is why it will be valuable. Because it's obviously quite easy to just get back in the mindset of I've got my 4 or 5 other critical clients and projects in the work, so I'll never quite get round to making the most of that particular introduction or that opportunity I spotted to speak to someone new and in different parts of their business. And broadening, we're quite lucky because of the wealth of specialisms we have, but this could be anything from broadening out into the client's technology department, their customer services team, and trying to work out with them how that we can support them to show the sort of true wealth of capabilities within the business.
Yeah, I guess it's about almost having a bit of a strategic framework to understand like where you're trying to take the client and what you're trying to do as a business, to sort of guide you and make those priority decisions. As you said, otherwise it's kind of business as usual, kind of ticking along, but then no one's sort of thinking long term. So yeah, I'm interested, going back to some of the relationships and things, and how sort of maybe you talked a little bit how you make clients feel valued and comfortable, but also setting boundaries. Like I can understand, like, and you might have examples where you've been asked to do things as an agency that you've kind of pushed back against, or I'm just interested, sort of ensuring that there's a healthy and productive relationship, sort of moving forward. How do you kind of set those boundaries, so that clients don't take the piss, and that they know that there is a line here that you can't overstep. I find I'm pitching, you don't want to be too subservient.
So I'm living it today. Funny enough, I don't know if anyone here has issues with NDAs, but we got sent a fairly outrageous NDA by a client, which left us very legally vulnerable if we signed it. And of course, they just said, you have to sign this. This is non-negotiable if you want the brief. It has to be done by 3 p.m. tomorrow. And so, our legal team reviewed it and we were just like, sorry, if it's non-negotiable, here are comments. I'm afraid we're going to have to bow out of the process. A week later, they come back and now they're like, oh, it'd be great to talk about the NDA, please. And, so they've clearly either had responses they don't like or they, but it was worth playing hardball. It's like, that's not, why would you, as an agent, it's so tempting because you just want to get the brief. You want to get the brief and you're like, okay, maybe we can figure out down the line. But I think it just shows that we value our thinking and our creativity and as a business. And, I think that's setting off on a pretty healthy note.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't even think about that, but I can think of similar scenarios I've been in myself when, and certainly thinking about the pitch process and how you're sort of forced to do certain things that maybe don't feel right to you. And yeah, sometimes just need to be challenged, right? Nick, have you seen similar? How have you kind of, had to set boundaries when working with clients?
We used to, in previous agents I worked in, we used to put, it sounds so cheesy and slightly trivial, but we used to have this thing called the partnership proposal, which was just on the cusp of formally agreeing to work together. We would take them effectively a set of sort of mutual expectations on both sides in terms of what we would need from the clients in order to make the relationship a success and what we would deliver in return. And that was quite big ticket items in terms of, it might be about, we need access to certain levels of data or to certain team makers or regular interactions with senior sort of C-suite reps, through to the sort of the more day-to-day stuff, which is why I say it was trivial, but around how they like to work. And it's useful from a boundary perspective because then obviously you can understand how they like to interact with their agencies and then make a plan accordingly. And that could be everything from what kind of meeting cadence they might like, to stuff like, what does close of play mean for them? Because obviously just little things like that, and we see this when we do our sort of client appraisals, and speaking to the client relationship consultancy about it, you always think that a relationship will ultimately be killed on the sort of big important stuff, like not hitting the strategic mark or the creative not living up to expectations. But a lot of the time it can just be the amalgamation of these small little gripes that, particularly at sort of a junior and mid-level client, builds up. And then when they are asked by their senior management team about how the agency relationship is going, it's clouded by those little gripes rather than the quality of your actual output and the outcomes you're developing for their business. So we found it, I don't think it's something, I'm sure it's done in a sort of a less formalized way here, but having that sort of section where you say, look, this is how we typically work, this is how this is what we'd like to know about how you work and how can we meet in the middle. And that sometimes if the clients aren't find it too abstract, the easiest thing to then is focus on is just tell us about what you liked and didn't like about working with previous agencies, because that gives them a focus point where it's very easy to suddenly say, well, this was a nightmare and this is what we'd like to do differently, or this worked really well and we'd like to retain it. You can then put a plan together where hopefully you can kind of set a way of working that means that you are both going to feel that you're not overstepping any boundaries.
Yeah, I love that, especially about the previous agency relationships. I think that's such an important one, which people forget, and it's such a giving tell. Sometimes like they give you this whole new brief and they want this whole new creative direction. You're like, because most agencies have great creative and strategic talent. Let's face it, right? There's plenty of talent out there, and it's sometimes it's not that's going to win or lose a pitch or push people away. And actually, if you just turn around and say like, the last agency had loads of creative strategic talent, but you're not working with them anymore. So what went wrong? And you'll find out that it probably wasn't that. It was kind of some of the maybe trivial or little things that led to bigger things that actually was about the account, the way it was run, or just that the way you sort of engaged with one another. But I do like that whole idea of setting out your stall from the beginning, and I think we've even done similar things with agencies because we've seen where it can go wrong. And sometimes people ask us, like, for grey matters, they say to me sort of like, what do you need from us? Like, what would you expect from us in this relationship? And I think that's a great opportunity for us to sort of go, well, actually, yeah, and this is what we need from a sort of mindset and a culture and an attitude, and this is how much time we need, and this is how we're going to work. And it gives you that open playing field to actually have an open dialogue. Say, like, can you commit that time? Are you going into this with the right mindset and an approach to it? And then you can quickly tell if this is going to sort of work or not work, from the off. So, yeah, I like that. Anything to add, Kate, on sort of boundary setting or?
I think that's good from my perspective.
What about just in pitch process? Is there any times where, I know like procurement are sometimes holding the cards and things like that, or the intermediary? Like, do you tend to have to go along with the pitch process, or do you guys try to sort of challenge it or bend it in any way to kind of help you? Either of you, I don't mind.
I mean, it's always good to, have conversation with procurement as early as possible. Sometimes it's very rigid process and you're not able to. I think also it's worth, we do a lot of outbound, include procurement on your outbound, build relationships with them as well as, potential clients outside of procurement. I think it's valuable. So you're not a stranger by the time the brief comes along. I think it's smart. And then one thing, I mean, everyone procurement, they're always trying to drive a hard bargain, but we're very steadfast. And, if we're reducing price, we're reducing scope. It's got to be a trade-off. It's got to be a trade-off. So I think getting those principles at the beginning of giving them options, I think is key.
Yeah, and I wanted to sort of get into that a little bit. I think, Nick, when we last spoke, you talked a bit about collaborative sessions to sort of help, commercial strategies, ensuring success for both parties and things like that. So talk to me about that, how, what strides you've gone to try and make that work and how you approach those conversations.
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, some of this is theory that we're hoping to put in. Some of it is in play. But I think we did an exercise. I've done it now at my previous agency, and then brought it to VCCP. We worked with a third party called the Ignition Consultancy Group, who do work with agencies to help them evaluate their pricing techniques, their pricing models, and their negotiation strategies, all with the single aim of trying to protect and preserve and ideally grow their margin. And I think what they really espouse, and I guess it's become a little bit of a cliche now, but is all of the constraints and issues with the billable hour, both on a client side and on the agency side. One of the suggestions that they have, which we embraced in my last role, and we're hopefully going to start launching here, is these ideas of slightly naff name, but success or value workshops, which you would have with the client in the outset. And in that, you are really going through at quite a detailed level about what the shared objectives are going to be for the partnership. So as much on the softer side, but then the actual outcomes in terms of the relationship, but then the actual outcomes about what this project is going to drive, and whether that you're looking at from a behavioral perspective, a consumer attitudinal perspective, a commercial perspective, really trying to distinguish what they will be evaluated on internally and how that marries up with what you can provide. It's quite a difficult, challenging conversation. Like you obviously every brief will have some objective in it, but it's not clear about how they've arrived at that and what they think the sort of steps are to getting to that, and what can be influenced and what can't. So when we've done it before, there's quite tough, awkward conversations. But what's great is obviously if you can do that, you can then work on a pricing model that effectively both parties have bought into. And we think that that can really set the sort of foundations for the relationship, because it's almost pricing as a proxy for shared ambition, which I think is critical in terms of how we, obviously as an industry, just generally align better to the actual commercial objectives of these organizations that we work with.
Yeah, it makes sense. And is that something you tend to do at the beginning of the process or towards the end? Because it kind of feels like it could have an influence even on the brief and the
Yeah. I think a lot of the time, obviously, you don't get the access that you want to in the process, and obviously early on, a lot of the time, you want your questions and interrogation to focus on the client brief at hand in terms of getting the details to that, so you feel fit to respond. There have been cases where we've run what we've effectively coined a sort of commercial tissue. So that is throughout the pitch process. It's obviously a great way to Kate's point about not sort of demonizing and ostracizing procurement, making them part of the pitch team that you're responding to, and that being a simple way to do it. And the commercial tissue can effectively act as this sort of success workshop. There's others where we've done it almost just at the outset of the project, and sort of caveated the fact that the commercial model they're seeing as part of the response, if you haven't had that conversation during the pitch, is indicative and is subject to you guys working through what the true objectives are, and then how you can find a pricing model that is mutually beneficial. And obviously the sort of holy grail being that you sort of align your sort of economic incentives on both sides.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, as you said, it's always difficult conversations to have, but so important in setting off to the right start, right? That everyone's getting what they want and what success looks like. And also, I suppose you're trying to manage expectations in that as well, right? Because or temper them a little bit, to ensure that they're not running away with things or thinking things are going to, be all rosy when it's actually, a really tough market and it might not be. But I suppose also trying to get them to understand the value of the work you get, which, with the billable sort of traditional system is so hard to get across. Certainly if it's procurement people or people that just don't understand how to value marketing and the benefits it can bring. So yeah, okay, no, that was cool. Very, very interesting to hear. And I think then looking at obviously I don't know, maybe more for you, Kate, the sort of people in the room and the relationships again, and sort of how you're potentially handing over, like you said, to the core team, and involving sort of senior management and sort of traditionally transitioning to the client teams that would come into place. How does that work with you guys through a pitch process, and sort of bringing in the right people at the right team, or pulling that team together in the first place?
So I mean, it varies from opportunity to opportunity. I think I will tend to be the especially with net new business, tend to be the kind of main point of contact with the client until we convert. But there, Q&A calls, tissue meetings, the full team will be there, so they will be building that relationship with them. And I sort of feel like my role is, in the meetings, is also to create an environment and to get everyone prepped for them to shine. That's the thing. It's like I want to make them look as good as possible, make sure the clients are receptive enough for the team to do all the amazing work. So I think setting them up in that way is really important. But casting is super important, getting the right mix. We're really lucky here that we've got some people with really deep knowledge in certain sectors and capabilities, and having them involved from day one just keeps us on track.
And do you do that thing kind of like behind the scenes when obviously there's team calls, but then everyone needs a little bit of talking to on an individual level? Are you that kind of person that sort of goes round and trying to understand how they're getting on with the pitch or where they're at with it and the relationship? Is it?
Oh, do you mean like our team as
Yeah,
individuals?
like internal coaching or like that kind of getting
I
people.
mean, I mean, they all know their stuff. They don't need me coaching them on that. But I think with the you know, presentation and the, how it's structured and the kind of storytelling element, I can definitely help them on. But yeah, they don't need much help from me in that respect.
No, it's just more sort of like know what's at stake sometimes, and then like you said, like providing that research for them about who they're going in to meet and um the maybe the wider context behind some of the business challenges that they might be having and things like that. I always find like that's such an important part of going deeper into a brief.
Yeah. I mean, we do a lot of prep around background of the clients, background of the company. We're really fastidious about every conversation, what are the key takeouts. So everything is there in one place for the team to read. And also it's important when some pitch team members might come in halfway through. And so we've got this kind of one point of truth, which is the thing they can read, that they will get hopefully most of the nuance of, what's happened in the preceding weeks. But yeah, I definitely feel that that's a really important role for BD to play, of the kind of the keeper of all that truth, to be the North Star that everyone's running towards.
Yeah, cool. Okay. I was just going to ask about your general approaches to BD at the moment, really, and sort of like in the market or times of like what's changed in terms of like I feel like the business development role has changed quite a lot. Maybe not so much in the traditional pitch, but certainly if you think about everything around it, from sort of marketing, content, events, outreach, all of that. So yeah, I don't know, Nick, do you want to maybe kick off? Is there anything like you feel like you've changed in the last kind of 12 months or 6 months that, or planning to this year, that you've had to adapt to the market?
I don't think significant changes. I mean, obviously, I'm just sort of 15, 16 months into the role, and I've always looked enviously and curiously at the VCCP new biz machine. So it's actually just been great observing how they work. And it sounds, again, it's easy to sort of present as a bit of a cliche. Just the value on the human relationships just across the entire new biz ecosystem is extraordinary in terms of the amount of engagement, whether it's client prospects, old clients moving to new roles, the intermediaries. There is a plan in place, and a genuine desire to sort of foster and keep those relationships that is extraordinary to watch. I think from a content perspective, that's a big focus of mine in terms of we do a lot. We have a very effective PR and comms team, and there's a lot of that ends up in terms of commentary on industry or macroeconomic cultural events. We haven't done as much in the last 18 months on putting our sort of big strategic thinking and opinion pieces out there. So we're thinking about how we reboot those and how we do that globally, which is actually it's tough trying to align on a central subject that is going to have as much relevance here as it will in China to Singapore to Madrid, Prague, the US. So we are really looking at how we create a sort of base template that each of the offices can then regionalize. And I think that will be a key focus for us in terms of using that content and the associated events to sort of drive new opportunities. And also just the approach to business development, which is obviously critical to my role, but the organic growth is these new opportunities with existing clients they're treated as pitches. The amount of effort and time and investment that goes into working with a new brand within a existing client portfolio or selling in a new capability gets the level of treatment that a pitch would, which I think it obviously makes such sense because these are opportunities that sometimes equal in commercial value to the agency as a net new opportunity. But if you're going to spend 50, 60 grand on a pitch, why, and you've got a 1 in 4, 1 in 5 chance, whatever your conversion rate is, why wouldn't you be doing that on a business development opportunity that might not even be competitive? So that for me is, and I don't know whether that's always been the case because I haven't been here long enough, but it definitely feels like there is a very strong focus on how we do that.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense, and I think too many agencies oversee that. To be honest with you, I think there's too much sitting right in front of their noses that is such great commercial opportunities with their existing clients. As you said, they've already got the relationships there. Much easier to sort of build upon those than try and win new stuff all the time. And even from a retention perspective, I've always thought like you kind of every year you should act about like you're about to lose that client, like that they're going up for pitch. What would you do? Because you know that all your clients are being tapped up by every other agency or your competitors. Like we're not naive, like it's going on all the time. So you kind of have to be in that. I think we talk about earlier being paranoid or something like all the time a little bit, but it is healthy in honing your strategy and sort of from a retention perspective.
I'm sure everybody's experiencing this in at some part, but given obviously the sort of cautious optimism in certain sectors and in society in general, but every client seems to go through a sort of biannual enormous restructure at the moment. It's almost comical in terms of getting plans sorted, and then suddenly there's a headcount or a reorganization review. So it means that you have to work that much harder. Some of the analogy that someone used in terms of sort of taps turning off, and then when they turn back on, working out where your cup should be, which is, I mean, it's a sort of skill in itself because you're constantly having to battle these enormous changes that the organizations that we're working with are going through as well. So that's a really key part about what we're focusing on with some of our most significant pieces of business.
Yeah, and I think we'll go back to your thought about relationship building. I think that's so important in that situation, isn't it? Because it's people moving around or understanding what they're trying to achieve. It's holding on to those. But yeah, that's definitely tough. You someone new comes in, then it's a whole new leadership direction and changes everything you've just kind of put in place for 2 years. I have got a question from Laurie. Kate, did you have anything you wanted to share, particularly just on, before I ask that question, just on your adaptations to BD at the moment? Is there anything in particular that you've put in place or had to recently?
I think it might sort of dovetail into what Laurie's asking, but I've been very inspired by how we approach experience design at RGA and thinking about how that applies to, building new business relationships. And the sort of number one thing is understand your consumer and really understanding the challenges that clients are going through at the minute, I think has really informed how we've gone to market in terms of, the language we use, the product offering. And I think shaping your content around those challenges is really important. We polled all of our clients at the end of last year, kind of what they were experiencing, what their pain points were, and have been creating content around that. And then also looking at kind of, the usual reports and things that, are in market for everyone to see. And I think I don't know, I don't think that's giving too much away. I think there's your process you wouldn't necessarily give away. I think, that is, you should keep that guarded. But I think thought leadership and opinion, you can also recycle stuff from pitches, which is quite good, and get the, the value out of it. But I haven't worried too much about, are we giving away too much when it comes to thought leadership?
Yeah.
I kind of think it's the value of it still being attributed to us, and versus any competitor actually being able to execute it feels low.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. I mean, it's really interesting about polling the clients and getting closer to their challenges. I think that's so important right now. You've always got to be, relevant, right, all the time. But I mean, I don't know about your thoughts on it, but like in terms of I personally feel that question. I think there's a sort of reluctance because we know that we need to be giving away value and adding value at every stage of the customer journey and to bring people in. I think people get worried about giving too much away, and I would say give away everything almost. You know what I mean? Like don't worry about it too much because, like you said, Kat, I think you've still got to execute on that thing. And I think there's so much content that's readily available out there. Like, I don't think anyone's got the golden bullet thing that, you know, that nobody else has got sometimes. And I've thought this a lot myself in running my own business, like, oh, you know, we're giving too much away there. Are people going to be able to copy that? And I'm like, just let them copy it. Like, do it. You know what I mean? You'll always be one step ahead either way. So yeah, I don't know. My thoughts are more about giving value, not over worrying about, you know, what's behind the scenes. But
yeah. Although, Laurie, what have you got behind the curtain? Do you want to tell us? Sounds great.
We do want to hook people in a little bit, like stuff. So you're putting stuff out, reeling them in, but you're probably not able to give everything away. And really, what it comes, it's your people, right? That are the things behind the curtain. That they're the value, and you can't clone people yet. But you know, I don't know, Nick, I'll hand to you for the last maybe thoughts on this.
No, I mean, we talked about when we started looking at rebooting our content program or thought leadership, or whatever you want to talk about it. The phrase that got bandied around was content pollution, which is there is so much out there. I would just focus on putting the best, most insightful, revealing, informative content that you can out there, because it's competing against so much. There's so much going on. We were speaking to a procurement consultant, and she was like, I'm inundated with event invitations. Like they are everywhere. So you may as well put your best foot forward in the hope of looping them in. I guess the key thing to then work out, and what's hopefully going to be quite refreshing about the way we're approaching it, not that it's unique, I'm sure, is making sure that there is a tangible reason for that next connection. So there is some, off the back of you presenting your content, there is some bespoke data cut that you can do for that client on their particular sector, or there is some free or co-invested workshop that you can do that will actually lead to sort of tailored outcomes or recommendations for their business. Or it might be that you're in the fortunate position you actually have a product that you can sell to them off the back of that. But I think obviously the challenge with the content stuff is it's so easy to just bucket it all into profile building and client engagement. But obviously the magic bit is if you can actually convert it into revenue. And I think having an idea in your head about what that might look like, it's still going to be a long shot. The conversion rate is going to be low, but will just help you think about it in a more structured way rather than just, it's good to get our voice out there.
Yeah, definitely. I've talked to a lot of agencies about things like gateway products you're talking about and ways that you can sort of get your foot in the door to start a commercial conversation happening. And if I'm honest, I think that's where agencies are struggling the most, is actually how to have those kind of open, honest conversations with clients, how to challenge their thinking, how to deliver value, and how to convert, right? How to actually sort of move things along rather than just having a nice chat with somebody that doesn't actually lead anywhere. But I'm afraid that is all we have time for today. So big thank you to you, Nick and Kate, for joining today. But yeah, no, great.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you. Cheers, Adam.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Take care. Bye all.